You went to the store, grabbed a tool with a name you've trusted your whole life, brought it home, and 6 months later, the thing is falling apart. The handle cracked, the ratchet slips, the blade wobbled from day one, and you're standing there thinking, what happened? This is the same brand my dad used for 30 years. But here's the thing. It's not the same brand. It's the same name. And there's a massive difference between those two things. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how some of the most legendary tool names in American history got hollowed out and what that actually means for every dollar you spend at the hardware store. Hit that subscribe button before we get into it, because this one matters. I'm Jerry Davis, and I've spent a long time in renovation, construction, and job site work. I've run crews, I've managed projects, I've had to fight with tools in conditions where a bad tool doesn't just cost you time, it costs you a contract. I know what good tools feel like, and I know what cheap tools dressed up in good branding feel like. And I want to be honest with you about something most people in the tool world don't talk about clearly enough. The American tool industry didn't just struggle, it was sold, piece by piece, brand by brand, factory by factory. And the names you grew up trusting are now mostly just labels on products that have nothing to do with the companies, the workers, or the engineering that made those names worth trusting in the first place. Let's start with Craftsman, because that's the one that hits home for most people. If you grew up in the 1970s, 80s, or 90s, Craftsman was the standard. Your dad had Craftsman wrenches. Your grandfather had a Craftsman socket set. And the reason people bought them wasn't just because they were decent tools. It was because of the warranty. No receipt, no questions, no shipping anything back. You walked into any Sears location in the country, handed a broken Craftsman wrench across the counter, and walked out with a replacement. That was it. That was the deal. And for decades, Sears stood behind it. People built tool collections knowing that if something broke, they were covered for life. That warranty was the product as much as the steel was. Then, Sears started falling apart. The company had been struggling for years, and by 2017, they sold the Craftsman brand to Stanley Black & Decker for around $900 million. And right there, that's the first moment where something important happened. Sears didn't sell a factory. They didn't sell a workforce. They didn't sell a manufacturing process or a quality standard. They sold a name. Just the name. And Stanley Black & Decker, who had their own manufacturing networks and their own supply chains, took that name and started putting it on products that go through their system, which leans heavily on production overseas. Now, some new Craftsman stuff gets made or assembled in the United States, but a lot of it doesn't. And the warranty? That full lifetime no questions exchange. Gone. It's been replaced with a tiered system where coverage depends on the type of tool, and you have to return the damaged item to a stocking retailer that currently carries the line. It's a warranty in the technical sense, but it's not the Craftsman warranty your dad was talking about. That one died with the Sears relationship. Here's what bothers me about all of this. Nobody did anything illegal. Nobody lied in a dramatic way. What happened is that a brand earned trust over generations through actual quality and a genuine customer promise. Then, when the company that built that trust got into financial trouble, they sold the name to someone else. And the new owner is a legitimate business making legitimate products. But they didn't buy the obligation. They didn't buy the culture. They bought the logo and the recognition. And the consumer, who doesn't follow corporate acquisition news, is still walking into Lowe's and buying Craftsman because their brain says, trusted brand, even though the chain of trust was broken years ago. And look, Craftsman is just the easiest example to explain because most people know it. The pattern runs much deeper than one brand. Let's talk about skill, specifically Skilsaw, because this one is a piece of American history that most people don't fully appreciate. In 1924, a man named Edmund Michel developed the first electric handsaw. He teamed up with a developer named Joseph Sullivan, and together they eventually created the circular saw as a handheld tool. That's not a small thing. The circular saw changed construction. It changed woodworking. It changed what a single carpenter or contractor could do in a day. The Skilsaw Model 77, which came out in 1937, became so dominant that for decades, people didn't say circular saw. They said Skilsaw. The brand became the generic term. That's how embedded this thing was in American building. Contractors called it a skill saw, the way people call all tissues Kleenex. This company, born out of American ingenuity, that literally changed how the country was built, got sold to Emerson Electric, then Emerson sold it to Bosch, and then in 2016, Bosch sold the Skill brand to Chervon, a company based in Nanjing, China. So the saw that people called the saw that built America is now a Chinese-owned brand. The worm drive Skilsaw still exists, and I'll give credit where it's due. The Saw Squatch and the current Skilsaw worm drives are still solid tools. But the point isn't whether the current product is good or bad. The point is that the American company that invented this category of tool no longer exists. What you're buying is the descendant of a name. Porter Cable is another one. Founded in 1906 in Syracuse, New York. These guys invented the portable belt sander. They were genuine innovators. Over time, they got sold to Pentair, then to Black & Decker, which became Stanley Black & Decker. And at some point, the manufacturing moved. Today, Porter Cable tools are made primarily in Mexico and China. I don't say that to shame the workers making them, or to pretend overseas production is automatically bad. But for a brand that spent a century as an American manufacturing story, that history is mostly just a paragraph on their website now. And then there's Disston. If you've never heard of Disston, you're not alone, because the company is essentially gone. But at one point, Henry Disston and Sons in Philadelphia was the largest sawmaker in the world. 8,000 employees. A factory complex that covered 300 acres. This wasn't a small operation. This was an industrial powerhouse in the middle of a major American city. People in Philadelphia grew up working at Disston. Families had 3 generations inside those walls. The company got sold in 1955 to H.K. Porter, then eventually to a Swedish company called Sandvik, and the manufacturing just dried up over time. If you want a vintage Disston handsaw today, you buy one at an estate sale or off an antique tool website, because that's all that's left. The physical object from the good years. Now, I want to be fair here, because this isn't just a story about bad decisions or greed. The economics that drove this are complicated, and a lot of it came from the retail side, not just the manufacturing side. When big box stores became the dominant channel for tool sales, the pressure on price became enormous. A contractor might have paid $70 or $80 for a quality American-made hand tool in 1985. But when you put that same product next to a similar-looking tool from overseas at $35, and the average homeowner standing in the aisle can't tell the difference, by looking at the box, the manufacturer has a problem. The big box stores were negotiating on price. The consumer was buying on price. And the domestic factories couldn't compete on price against facilities in countries with dramatically lower labor costs. So the manufacturers had a choice: either absorb losses and eventually go under, or shift production overseas and keep the name alive. Some of them made that choice themselves. Others got bought by holding companies that made the choice for them. And some just didn't survive at all. Now here's something interesting, and this is where it gets a little more nuanced. Not every sale to a foreign holding company is a death sentence for quality. Milwaukee Tool is the best example of this. Milwaukee was sold to Tektronic Industries, TTI, a company headquartered in Hong Kong, back in 2005 for around $626 million. TTI also owns Ryobi, Rigid, AEG, and some other brands. And when they bought Milwaukee, a lot of people expected the brand to get downgraded and turned into a budget line. The opposite happened. TTI invested heavily in Milwaukee's engineering and product development. They pushed into cordless technology. built the M18 platform into arguably the most robust professional battery system on the market, and actually opened manufacturing in the United States. Are all Milwaukee tools made here? No, they manufacture globally. But the quality got better, not worse, and the professional market responded. Milwaukee today is a legitimately respected brand in the trades. So the foreign ownership story is not always a simple decline. Sometimes the new owner takes the brand more seriously than the previous one did. But that's the exception, not the rule. What you really need to know is this: there are still American companies making tools in America, and they're worth knowing about. Klein Tools has been making hand tools since 1857, and they have not left. They've opened more plants in the United States. They employ thousands of American workers. Their pliers, their wire strippers, their linemen's tools, these are made here, and electricians have trusted them for generations. Channellock, out of Meadville, Pennsylvania, has been making pliers in the same community for over 140 years. Still family-owned, still sixth generation. More than 90% of their tools are made right there in Pennsylvania. Snap-on still manufactures heavily in the United States, and their quality shows in the price, which, yes, is significant. But you're paying for actual American manufacturing, not just an American-sounding name. So here's the practical part of all this. When you're standing in the tool aisle, or shopping online, or asking your contractor what brand they use, you need to think differently than you might have before. A familiar name on the box is not a guarantee of where that tool was made, who made it, or what standard it was held to. You need to ask yourself a few things. Who actually owns this brand right now? Where is this specific product manufactured? What does the warranty actually say in writing today? Not what it said 20 years ago. And is this a professional line or a consumer line? Because some brands run two completely different quality tiers under the same name. Craftsman has a professional line that performs better than the standard consumer version. DeWalt, which is a Stanley Black & Decker brand, is still generally respected in the trades. Milwaukee has earned its reputation back and then some. But the old rule of thumb, just buy the name your dad trusted, that rule doesn't work anymore. Because in a lot of cases, what you're buying is the memory of a reputation that a completely different company, in some cases, a company headquartered on the other side of the world, is now renting out. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every tool made overseas is garbage. I've used imported tools that perform well, and I've used American branded tools that fell apart in a week. The label stopped being a reliable shortcut a long time ago. You have to actually know the product now, not just the name. Read the reviews from people using it in professional settings. Look at what the tradespeople in your specific field are actually carrying. Ask a plumber, an electrician, a framer, not what brand their grandfather recommended. What they personally carry on the job today. Tell me in the comments which brand you had the most trust in before you really dug into where they ended up. Because I've had this conversation on a lot of job sites, and it almost always surprises people when they find out who actually owns the name on the tool they've been buying for years. The bottom line is this: American tool manufacturing didn't disappear overnight. It was sold, consolidated, and offshored over about 30 to 40 years of business decisions that made sense on a spreadsheet and made a lot of people a lot of money. The names are still here. The factories, the workers, the standards that made those names worth something in the first place. A lot of that is gone. Buy tools based on what they actually are right now, not on what the brand used to be. And if you want to support the companies that still make things here, Klein and Channellock are exactly where to start. Hit like, subscribe, and share this one with someone in the trades who's still buying based on old loyalty. I'll catch you in the next one.